Hey guys, Paul Jimlikowski, personal trainer at PGM Fitness here. In this video, as part of my series about the differences between resistance bands and free weights and how they can benefit you, I want to continue to touch upon about how resistance bands are different than free weights. Now, in my last video, I talked about how gravity plays a major role in how free weights work because it is entirely dependent on how the weight gets pulled to the floor by gravity. Whereas with resistance bands, gravity is not a factor unless you make it so. So what I want to talk about today in this video is about how resistance bands work different than free weights, not just because of gravity, but because of how they physically work. So, with a free weight, let me explain how it works. Now, the hardest part of the motion, and again, I'm going to use the bicep curl as an example. The way it works is the resistance mainly starts in the beginning of the motion and through the middle of it. But by the end of the motion with a free weight, the amount of resistance that's working against your body greatly decreases. There is much less resistance up here than there is here in the beginning and middle of the motion. So what happens is your muscle will get stronger at the beginning of the action, but by the end of the action, it's going to lose a little bit of the amount of work that's being done. So hard, hard, easier, easier, easy. Now this is because, again, what's happening is the line of motion is going straight down my arm. Okay? So the difference between that and the band is that with the band, because it's not reliant on gravity, it actually gets harder as you go through the motion instead of easier. So I'm going to go ahead and show you again with the bicep curl as an example. And I'm going to go ahead and just use one handle here. Now, what happens is the band naturally is going to start off at a certain resistance force. So this actually says 20 pounds of resistance, but I don't really go by the amount of resistance it says because it's variable depending on the amount of resistance you're giving it. So if I'm only pulling it here, it might be a certain degree of resistance, but if I'm way up here, it's going to be more. Okay, so the biggest difference is, and again, I'm using the bicep curl as an example. When you're starting the exercise initially, it's going to be easier, but as you get further into the motion, it's going to get progressively harder. So it's the opposite with the free weight. Now here's where that can really benefit you. The further point your body is away from the axis of pulling, so in this case the axis would be wherever the band is being pulled from. So if I'm stepping on it, and I'll back up so you can see it here, if I'm stepping on the band right here, this is my axis point of resistance. So the further I get away from there, the less stable it's going to be, which means that it's going to work on my stabilizer muscles even more so than the free weight initially would. So what's going to happen is the further I get away from the axis point, the more resistance there's going to be on the joint, or that's performing the action, which is a good and a bad thing. So what that means is I'm going to be strengthening the muscles in my elbow, or not the muscles, but the muscles surrounding the elbow and the tendons there, and the ligaments. Now that's a really good thing because it can help to promote strength, it can help to promote power, as well as stability, which is a really big one. So this is a really good idea for people who play sports because it can help promote mind-muscle connection, it can help strengthen the joints. So I'll show you another example. If I'm doing a oblique twist, I'll show you around this pole here. So my point of axis now changes here. So what's going to happen is, if I'm doing an oblique twist, and I got to kind of angle this a little better here so you can see, this is my axis here. Now as I'm twisting, it's going to get progressively harder, and I'm going to have to work harder to maintain this position here. So again, what I'm doing is I'm promoting the muscle strength, because again, it starts easy, but the further away I get from the axis, the more power that's going to be promoted. So it's different in free weights in that sense. So I'm going to wrap up this video now and just kind of conclude it for you. Basically, with free weights, it starts off harder but gets easier as you go. With resistance bands, it may start easy but get harder as you go, which can be both good and bad. Which is why I say it's good to have a good mix of free weights, body weight exercises, and resistance band exercises. I prefer that in my workout, but if you have limited options, you may only want to be able to choose one. Especially if price is an issue. So again, these are just some things to think about when choosing, do I want to go with bands or do I want to spend more money and go with free weights? So I hope this video helps educate some of you on the differences between bands and free weights. And if you're still trying to decide which to go with, bands are definitely the more price-effective option. They're definitely different, like I've been explaining. So just some things to weigh out when you're trying to decide what to do. So I hope this video will help educate you on some of the differences. And good luck in making your decision. Stay tuned for more videos I'll be putting up with some of the exercises you can do with the bands. There you go. See ya.